Okay, so like I said, I want to go over how I selected a saddle for my Dengfu e10. And once again, this would apply for any bike. Also, just to understand, I didn't, use every criteria you can use to select a saddle. These were just the criteria that were most important for me in selecting the saddle. And the criteria I used were, is it hard, soft? Is the saddle narrow or wide? What color is it? And how much does it cost? Now, the evaluation criteria or ranking, what I'm trying to do here to help, understand the criteria, is put it in a numerical format. Now, really, when I was evaluating these saddles, I was doing it much, much more subjectively. But anyway, for purposes of this video, to help you understand what I did and how I evaluated it, I've ranked it for, how the width. And if the width is a width that I like, and most of my saddles I like to be in about the 145 millimeter width range. If it's a good width, I put it at a 10. If it's too wide or too narrow, I've, rated it closer to 1. The next criteria is how soft or hard. I generally like a saddle that has a little bit of give to it, not too hard, not too soft. So if it's, slightly soft, I've given it a higher score. But if it's too hard or too soft, I've given it a lower score. Now, the color, if the color is just right for the bike, I've given it a high score. If the color clashes with the bike or is just not a good color, I've given it a lower score. And in terms of the price of the saddle, a cheaper saddle gets a higher score than a more expensive saddle. So the first saddle that I went about, evaluating for the bike, and when I mean evaluating, I actually, bought the saddle, put it on the bike, rode the bike, for, a number of miles, and then decided, how I liked the saddle. Now, overall, this WTB Volt saddle is a saddle I've had on many bikes. In terms of the width of it, it's perfect. I think it's, spot on. In terms of the hardness and softness, the saddle is slightly hard, but not too bad. It feels almost perfect. So I would give it an 8. In terms of the color, though, it's just a black saddle. It doesn't clash with the bike, but it's not a very interesting looking saddle. So for the color, I've given it a 3. And in terms of the cost, it's about $30. Relative to the other options that I evaluated, it's I would say it's right in the middle, about a 5. The verdict for this, it's a great overall saddle, but it really just doesn't have enough color in it. It's not interesting enough. The next saddle I looked at is the ENLEE bicycle saddle, green, on AliExpress. I got it for 23 bucks. In terms of narrow wide, the saddle is just a little bit wider than I really like. It's not terrible, so I gave it a 6. But the real problem with this saddle is it is extremely hard. The saddle's made out of carbon fiber. In terms of the bottom, it does have a little bit of padding over that. And when I say a little bit, just a very, very little bit. The rails on the bike or the rails on this saddle are made out of carbon fiber, and this saddle just does not give any at all. It is extremely hard. The color, I really like the color. I thought the green with the gray and the white made it very interesting. It looked great on the bike. The best looking probably of any of the saddles on the bike that I looked at. And the cost, I've given it a 7. It's a good price. It's it's cheaper than the Volt, but it's not the cheapest. Relatively good price for the saddle. The verdict was it looks good, but it's too hard. And in terms of comment, I'm saying that this is a very, very harsh ride with this saddle. Even though your bike my bike was a full suspension bike, this saddle was just so hard that the suspension just really could not compensate for the harshness of this saddle. So the next saddle I looked at was a TOOPRE bike saddle, green, on AliExpress. It was about 11 bucks. in terms of wide, narrow, it was very good width on it, almost perfect. In terms of the hard and soft, the thing just was perfect in terms of it wasn't too hard, it wasn't too soft, but it did have, a good bit of give to it. Very, very comfortable saddle. The color of the saddle, though, I'd have to give it a 4. The real problem, this saddle, the green was just a very odd green, and I just didn't like the way it looked on the bike. In terms of the cost, I gave it, the highest score in a 10. I mean, at $11, you can hardly go wrong with this saddle. And overall verdict, this was almost perfect, but it was just the wrong color. So I was kind of almost back where I was with the WTB Volt saddle. Feels good, but the wrong color. And overall, this saddle really exceeded my expectations for it. The last saddle I looked at was a DVO Blazing Saddle green. Numerous U.S. vendors have this saddle for around $65. In terms of narrow wide, it's almost perfect. It's a little wide in terms of the saddles I look at, but nothing terrible. In terms of the harshness and softness, it is perfect. I mean, the saddle is made out of some kind of foam or memory foam that really just, it just feels really, really good. The color of it, the DVO green, I have some DVO parts on the bike, so it really goes well with that DVO green. I really like that. The only downside on this, it is much more expensive than your other options. For the verdict, I like this saddle the best, and you pay for what you get. Comment on this. I would say it's almost perfect for me. So after evaluating and going through these saddles, what I ended up with is on this bike, I have the DVO saddle, Blazing Saddle. It works great on the bike. I think it looks great. It really blends in well with the colors, and I love the feel of it. So that's how I went about selecting a saddle for my E10. I hope I've given you guys something to think about, and I'll see you at the top.